Welcome, everybody, to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is the brilliant Nikki Kinzer.
Oh, too kind.
The mind-blowing.
I wouldn't say brilliant.
Mind-blowing Nikki Kinzer. So you blew my mind last week with this whole build-a-word game and the want, have, should thing. And
Yes.
And now we're talking. This is a follow-up we're talking about.
Well, it's sort of a follow-up because I know we ended it last week at a really, good spot with letting go of that outcome. We really honestly didn't mean to take it there. I think it went on its own. And that's a beautiful thing about our show is that it just sort of has a life of its own. This particular episode following up on that is really just sort of taking that action, right? Because a lot of coaching is about action. It's okay. We've explored what I should be doing. We know that this is really important to me. I've closed that gap, of it being important and also me believing that I can do it. And so where do we start taking some little action steps of making it happen? Mm-hmm. And so I've just got a few things to kind of talk about. In order for the goal to be achieved, my first suggestion or tip, I guess you would say, is to brainstorm the different action steps that need to be taken. So if you've got a big project that you're working on and it has lots of components to it, do that brain dump, right? We've talked about that before many times in other episodes, but it's so important to get it out of your head and onto paper, right?
Yes.
And you had mentioned this last week. What resources do I need? And so that's important to kind of highlight. Do you need to hire other people? Do you need to take an extra class? Do you need, what do you need to make this project happen for you? And so recognizing that and putting it down on your mind map or however you're organizing this information.
Oh, yeah.
And the accountability system, do you have an accountability system in place that can help you stay on task? And what is that? Is that a coworker, a boss, a coach, a friend, whatever? Have that put in place. And that's kind of where you start, is that sort of your main brain dump starting place. Does that make sense?
Yes, it absolutely does. I think we dove in a little bit to that, which when we started peeling back that onion.
Yes.
And I feel like that gave me a lot to think about in terms of my own internal restrictions.
Well, and this second question is going to give you even more to think about.
Excellent.
Because again, it's digging in a little deeper. So I'm going to go back to the scale of 1 to 10. Now, again, some people don't resonate with that, so don't feel like you have to do that. It's just my example. But my next question is, you've got all of this information in front of you. You have these action steps. How willing are you to do whatever it takes to reach your goal?
Yeah.
And, again, it's sort of like, well, is that the same question as how much you value it? No, because it's really about how willing you are. Like, are you going to do this?
Yeah.
Are you going to make it a priority? Are you going to put it on your schedule? If you say, yeah, it's really important, I'm a 10, I'm willing to do whatever it takes.
Then why are you sitting there staring at Facebook?
And then days go on by, but you haven't taken any action, then you know what? You're not a 10.
Yeah.
And so we need to figure out what's going on here. What is getting in your way? And again, we're going back to those possible roadblocks, because you don't necessarily just catch them at, where we started talking about what we started talking about last week. We catch them even now as we are trying to move forward.
Right.
So
even both the practical and the emotional roadblocks, particularly here, the emotional roadblocks, I'd imagine.
Yes, exactly. So all of those belief things that we talked about last week can still kind of filter in. And so we got to just call them out and get to that willingness of, I'm at a 10 and I'm willing to take action. And so when you're there and you're ready, but you just don't know where to start, that's where we break projects down. Because if you remember 3 weeks ago when we were talking about planning as an executive function, and this is something that ADHD sometimes struggles with, it's hard to break down that goal. And so we want to break that down into small action steps. We're looking at our brain map, our mind map, and we're looking at, okay, what has to happen first? What happens next? What are some small things I can do right now? What are some things that I have to wait for? Whatever it is, but trying to sort of weed through that process, and working with somebody to help you do this is really beneficial. You don't have to feel like you have to do it by yourself, especially if planning is a struggle. Then ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
And then go ahead, please.
No. I was just going to say this can be anybody. I mean, this can be somebody who's close and trusted to you. It can be a coach. It can be just really the
colleague.
It's just taking the step to get over the fear of asking for help, which is often its own emotional block.
Absolutely. And then at that point, it's looking at the tasks, prioritizing them, getting them into some kind of order, getting them onto your calendar, starting small. You start small, you start seeing success, it starts building momentum. There's this sort of kind of visionary that I have is that, even these little steps still get you up on top of the mountain. Maybe not as quickly as if you're skipping 2 or 3 steps at a time, but you certainly have less chance of falling if you take 1 step at a time rather than skipping. So it's moving you forward. And that's what I always tell people is that even the small things matter. And even just getting the mind map done matters. I mean, that's 1 step, forward of taking what the should goal was into actually something that you care about and that you see through, which is a great thing.
Yes. I'm into that.
There you go.
Well, that was some very simple little follow-up.
Yeah.
I feel like it's much more to think about and practical motivation. Mm-hmm. All right. We also, I would say, we posted a couple of, it was one of the digital episodes. I'll dig up a link and post it in the show notes at takecontroladhd.com. We posted an episode on mind mapping tools and some of the background of mind maps and just how valuable they are. There's some videos on an old podcast episode, which I will share. If you haven't had a chance to go through some of those resources, if you're new to mind mapping, please do so, because the act of mind mapping uncovers, I think, so many of these practical roadblocks.
Yes, I agree.
It is such a useful tool. So invest in the tools that you are using to make your way. And you will, the utility of those tools goes up immeasurably. So that's what I have to add. That's about it. I'm pretty useless on this one.
No. Never useless.
Well, do we have any other announcements for the people?
Just a reminder to go check out the new website at takecontroladhd.com, which you've already mentioned.
Yes.
Want people to see it and play around with it and explore and look at it and tell me what you think.
Yes, new stuff on the way.
Yeah, that's cool.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Definitely check out the website. Subscribe to the show for free. You can do that from the website. It'll take you over to iTunes or your podcatcher of choice. And you can make sure you never miss a single episode of all this goodness. And thanks to everybody who has taken the time to leave us a kind comment on iTunes and positive ratings. Every one of those ratings helps other people discover the show when they search for this kind of support. So if this show has been important to you, we sure appreciate you sharing that love. Because we sure love doing it. On behalf of Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.